my name is Bill Conway. I am the alderman of the 34th Ward, which includes Greektown as well as where we're sitting. And I want to thank you all for coming to this meeting regarding the migrant shelter coming to the Parthenon Guest House, especially on short notice. Up to now, I haven't been shy about my frustration with the mayor's office with regard to the lack of notice and lack of detail regarding this plan. And I think this development in our community broadly speaks to how problematic and unsustainable the patchwork approach this humanitarian crisis our city faces is. In the long term, we're going to really need resources and collaboration from all levels of government to develop a long-term citywide solution to this problem. And I look forward to working with the mayor and my colleagues in the weeks ahead. Now that said, we're not going to solve all these problems tonight, and certainly none of my criticism is directed at the folks who have joined us tonight, who I greatly appreciate coming here to inform our community. And with me tonight is the Deputy Mayor for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, Beatrice Ponce de Leon. To her right, from DFSS, Danny Castaneda. From OEMC, Deputy Director Glenn Lyman. From the Chicago Police Department, we have Deputy Chief Chung, as well as Commander Giltmeyer from the 12th District. I'd also like to thank our other elected officials in the audience. I know we have State Senator Lakeisha Collins here, who is our partner and a great ally at the state level, and also recognize from the 1st Police District Council, Jamie Brown, who is here as well, that the relocation of migrants to the Parthenon Guest House is set to occur. We do not have a choice at this point, but rather the purpose of this meeting is twofold. First, we're going to receive valuable information from city officials about how this will be done in a safe and secure manner, and also we'll answer as many questions as we can from all of you. Now, understandably, people have very passionate opinions about this issue. And in order to keep this meeting productive, I have asked people to write their names and their questions on a note card. We'll group them together and make sure they aren't duplicative in nature to keep things orderly. We're all neighbors, and I certainly appreciate everyone showing each other that respect here tonight. So first, we're going to listen to a presentation and then take as many questions as we can. We do have a hard stop at 7, and we do have a lot of questions. So we will, once we get to the questions, we'll start with people in the community taking the microphone. If that ends up being especially duplicative or inefficient, I'll simply work off the cards. And if people didn't put their names on the cards, I'll simply ask the questions directly. But that said, when you do step up to the microphone, and I'll call people up to the microphone, I would ask that you keep it efficient, keep it to a question, since this is an informational meeting and not time for some kind of statement. With that said, the first bit of news I have to report is due to some logistical issues. The mayor's office has backed up the move-in date for new arrivals from this Friday to the following Friday, September 15th. As last I was told, maybe you'll have more information. As last I was told. And I do want to emphasize that I'm confident that we can do this in a safe and secure manner. More than 100 migrants were housed in the Parthenon Guest House from October to February this year, and that happened without incident. It was so uneventful that most people were not even aware it was happening, and I'm confident we can do that again. And despite my complaints about the lack of notice and lack of detail we've been given, we all do have to recognize the humanitarian crisis that our city is facing. We have buses arriving every day to Chicago with migrants, which has strained all of our city agencies. So regardless of your feelings on Chicago as a sanctuary city, I would remind you, we don't control the federal budget. We don't control the federal asylum process. We don't control what Governor Abbott does. We can only control what we can control. And I will say, to ensure that this is indeed a safe and secure environment, I have asked the mayor's office for proper security, and they have assured me that there'll be 4 security guards 24/7 at the shelter. And while it's no secret that there have been problems at other shelters in downtown Chicago, those are very different situations than we're facing here. The Parthenon Guest House will house far fewer migrants than those other places, and as I mentioned, additional security is being provided. Now again, if you do have a question as the presentation's going on, I suspect many of the questions will be answered by our esteemed folks from the city. But if you do have questions, please there'll be folks going around. I see Marty here has note cards. There'll be others as well. Please find folks in the back and fill out a note card. So at this point, let me turn it over for a detailed presentation of how we got where we are and the rest of the plan going forward. I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Mayor Ponce de Leon. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alderman Conway, and thank you all for joining us this evening. I just want to express our appreciation. You're taking the time to come here today to learn more about this shelter and to share your concerns, your ideas, your suggestions. After each one of these meetings, I always like to say that I listen for gold, because I think we always learn something that we take back, and we try to improve the work that we're doing. I would like to just take a moment to share that this is my role as Deputy Mayor for Immigrant, Migrant, and Refugees for the City of Chicago is the first time that our city has had that role. And I think it's kind of an important moment in our city's history. We've always been a city of immigrants. I grew up in Canaryville, where there's a lot of Irish pride. I am not Irish, but I grew up in that neighborhood, very aware of our immigrant roots. And I think we see it all over the city. Someone pointed out that the Jane Addams Hull House is a mile away, more or less, the museum. The birthplace of settlement houses in the U.S. started here in Chicago. So we have a history to build on, and as we've gone into different communities and met with folks, we have heard that there are people who embrace this mission and have stepped up to participate, and then there are many people who have concerns and suggestions, and our goal is to work through those conversations with all of you to share the information that we have, why we are doing this mission, what it will look like specifically here at the Parthenon, and to answer as many of your questions as we can. So I would just like to go over a few things, and then our team will introduce themselves each one at a time and share some of the slides to give you as many details as we can today, answer the questions. If there are questions we can't answer, we will get back through the Alderman's office for that, and please know that our lines of communication are open with you. So if we can start the slides. Thank you. Our goal as a city, we are a welcoming city, and our goal has been to welcome our new arrivals, new neighbors, in a way that is compassionate, a way that we help to support, provide for their basic needs like food and shelter and some medical care at times, and then also supports in partnership with many others, including the state, the county, and organizations, to help put people on a path to independence, self-sufficiency, where they can stay here in the Chicago area if they choose, or move on, but that they can be independent, and having had the supports of coming through the city. We have been doing this in crisis mode. It's been just opening shelters. You are all very aware of the people who are in our police stations, because we can't open shelters quickly enough. We know that that's not sustainable, and I want to assure you that we are in the process of creating a longer-term strategy to deal more directly with how we can support people and help them move through our system into their own spaces and into independence more quickly. Part of that has been that cities are not set up for this type of response. As the Alderman said, immigration policy, resettlement efforts are a federal responsibility. We have been thrown in the midst of this, not just Chicago, but other cities, because the governor of Texas is putting people on buses and sending them up. So we don't have control over the buses that are coming, but what we control is what the city can do to respond. I've been asked, why are we doing so much for these migrants? Why are we doing this? The alternative is, if we did nothing, people would be on the street. They're still going to come, and they would be in our communities in places that are, in ways that are unsafe for them and for others. So I think our response is we are a city that is able to pull together, is able to provide supports for not only our own communities, but for new communities. And we are working towards community safety for all. So part of this response is both for supporting the folks who are coming here, but also to support our communities. We know that we need to get it right. We need to adjust as this mission evolves, and I hope that we can partner with all of you and with others to do that work. The next slide, just sharing some numbers about where we are today. The first bus from Texas came last August 31st. We just made it to a year from when the buses started coming. Since then, we estimate that we've had about 13,500, maybe closer to 14,000 new arrivals in Chicago. That's an incredible number of people in a short period of time. And it has taken a lot of organizations, institutions, individuals to really welcome those folks and help put them on this path to resettlement. As most of you have heard, they are from Central and South America, but we actually have documented about 19 or 20 different countries, including Russia, Haiti, Angola. So there's some diversity there in who is coming across the border up here to Chicago. And then finally today, we are at over 6,800 people in the city shelters that we've opened. You'll hear more about how many and where they are. We have about just under 2,000 people in our police stations and at O'Hare waiting for a shelter bed. And since January, so just since the beginning of this year, we've seen 126 buses arrive. Of those 126, 118 have come since May, when this administration took over, and that really has put a strain. As soon as the administration came into office, jumping into the thick of managing this humanitarian crisis. Go on to the next one, please. I want to share this journey map, more or less. It shows you how we've been responding. So buses will come. They were coming into Union Station. Now there's a slightly different landing zone there. In addition to buses, which we are seeing daily, we now have a growing number of people coming into O'Hare. So San Antonio has been sending folks on airplanes. There's definitely a 9:30 flight, and then there's sometimes an evening flight. So we're seeing about 30 or 40 people coming through O'Hare. We're seeing maybe 1 to 3 buses. Today there were 4 coming into the city, and most buses have 40 to 50 people. Sometimes people don't know where they're headed. They are at the border. They're coming from different border towns, and they're being asked sometimes where to go. They might choose Chicago, they might choose New York, and then other times they're just, being sent over on the buses. We get some information about who's coming, but we don't always know how many people. We don't know if it's individual singles or families. Whatever we do know helps us to prepare, so that when they arrive, we can think about where we're going to place them. The placement, the landing zone has been police stations, and really it is not a place that anybody should be living. I don't know if any of you have been to a police station recently or driven by one, but having people sleep on the floor of police stations, outside of police stations because they're crowded, is unsustainable. It is disruptive to our police officers and the business of policing. But it has become the default landing zone. And so we're doing everything possible to transition people from the police stations into more decent and safe shelter. And I just want to really appreciate the Chicago Police Department for all that they've done to be able to attend to those families, and also to many hundreds of individuals and organizations that have sprung up and have provided support at police stations. Some of you might be involved in those groups, or you might see there are people bringing food, blankets, water, a variety of things, and we couldn't have had so many folks at police stations without all the mutual aid and the volunteers and the support. From there, we find a location at a shelter so that people have a more traditional shelter experience. The shelters are pretty basic. It's really a place to sleep, meals, and then we try to plug in some case management to connect them to different resources, but especially to put them on a path to living independently. The state has come in as a strong partner in our housing case management. So there is a program to provide rental assistance, a temporary rental assistance to new arrivals, and then also Catholic Charities has been a partner, and New Life Churches in terms of helping folks identify apartments, move out, and actually be able to settle into their own place. That whole process takes some time, and as you can imagine, it's slower to get people into their own apartments than it is, for them to come up into Chicago. So we're working on having this pipeline move more quickly and getting more people settled on their own as quickly as we can. I just want to share a few pictures. You might have seen in the news recently that we have a high number of people at O'Hare. Again, we weren't expecting flights to be coming in now every day from San Antonio, and we are at a very challenging point in O'Hare especially. The first picture is from one of the police stations. When I think about, sometimes I see coverage and people are concerned about migrants, and it feels like they're not human, but they are human. We all have a human right to seek asylum in another country, every single one of us in this room. If something were to happen, we have that right. I think people, it's just a reminder that they are individuals just like all of us. Whatever their circumstances have been, they're here. And we have had large numbers of immigrants come to Chicago over our whole history, and eventually they've become part of the fabric of the city. So our hope is that we are able to get through this period, that we're able to embrace our new neighbors, and that they're able to work and become productive and healthy members of our communities. I'm going to pass it over now to Danny from DFSS to share a little bit more details about the actual shelter operations.
Thank you, Beast. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Just to reintroduce myself, my name is Danny Castaneda. I'm a director with the Department of Family and Support Services, specifically over the new arrivals response. Been doing this for just over a year, which is pretty wild to say. But really wanted to show with this slide the current shelters, and I think the focus here is really the emphasis on the diversity of the locations, and there's a map to follow so you can sort of visualize that a little bit further. And then the other thing we wanted to emphasize is that our smallest shelter is 50 residents, and then our largest shelter is 1,500 residents, with that 1,500 one being downtown. So we really do have a diverse set of locations, a diverse set of populations, especially in terms of occupancy. And so again, here, just want to sort of put it on the map for a visual. So again, we have 18 shelters across the city. Obviously, we have 22 police districts stationed across the city as well, and those are in blue. And that's where folks are sort of waiting for the next shelter bed to be available. And then our 2 staging areas at O'Hare and Midway airports. So then this is just a brief recap of what folks, really just the shelter basics of what folks can expect, upon day one of being intaked at the shelter. So day one, when a shelter bed is available, an individual or family will be picked up and then placed at the available shelter, depending on their population. So single adults, aka adults without minor children, are placed in adult shelters, and then adults with minor children are placed in a family shelter. So upon intake, they get a sort of welcome orientation of what they can expect at the shelter and what they can expect from the city while they stay at the shelter. And then they sort of get an orientation to the actual space. They get assigned their room, assigned their bed, or in many cases a cot. They'll be given some basics like a blanket and a pillow, a hygiene kit, a towel, and then some of our sites have a laundry service on site, and then for the sites that don't have laundry service on site, we do have a service so that folks have access to clean clothes. And then just wanted to give a brief overview of the services that we offer across our shelter system. First and foremost is out-migration, which is supported through Catholic Charities. Out-migration is really you arrive to Chicago and you communicate to us that actually Chicago was not your final destination. You're actually looking to connect with family or friends or a support network in another city or in another state. Then we are able to offer out-migration through Catholic Charities, which is literally booking them a bus ticket or a plane ticket to their final destination where their family and friends are waiting to support them. Resettlement supports, which is Catholic Charities, IDA, which is the Illinois Housing Development Authority, and New Life Churches. So Catholic Charities is supporting in housing location, so finding a rental unit. IDA is administering the rental assistance, and then New Life is actually moving people in, and then sort of providing a basic set of furniture to sort of kick people off in their new home. Legal services, obviously folks are coming here seeking asylum. Our immigration system is very complex, and so we're making sure that we are offering some level of legal immigration support through the Metropolitan Family Services Legal Aid Society and other partners. Health and wellness is first and foremost, so we, Cook County Health, which is the county's healthcare branch, has been a huge partner in the Chicago Department of Public Health as well. So we have on-site healthcare providers, which we call the lead coordinating agencies, and those two are Heartland Alliance Health and Lawndale Christian Health Center. So they're on site once to twice a week, really giving that acute care and referrals to other services. And then obviously the continued access to Cook County Health. So our goal is once someone is intaked at a shelter within the first 72 hours, they go to their first Cook County Health visit and they get a full health screening, vaccinations, COVID test, really the full spectrum of a screening. Through the Office of the City Clerk, which is a department here at the City of Chicago, we have the City Key ID, which is the City of Chicago's municipal ID, which is a huge resource, not just for this population, but also for Chicago residents, which is something that we've tapped into regularly for the new arrivals. And then the Illinois Department of Human Services has a program known as the Victims of Trafficking, Torture, and Other Serious Crimes, which really gives folks access to Medicaid and then other services similar to the Link Card. And then, of course, for our families with minor children, our priority is to get folks enrolled into Chicago Public Schools. And so just wanted to recap for timeline and capacity. Our projected move-in date currently is for September 15th. The facility at the Parthenon will likely be used for to shelter single adults, but this is still under consideration. It's really looking at who we're receiving on buses currently, who is actually arriving on a bus and actually needing shelter. Not everyone that's arriving to Chicago on a bus is actually in need of shelter. Many of them are getting picked up by family or friends or have onward travel plans once they arrive here. And then depending on who's arriving at police stations, that decision is still under consideration. And then our overall capacity by the end of September will be 196, and that's where we will max out. So I'll hand it over to Commander Giltmeyer.
Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. I know everyone's busy. I'm Beth Giltmeyer. I'm the commander of the 12th District. First and foremost, I want to thank our officers and our community partners who jumped to the aid of the migrants initially with food, health care, socialization, and everything else that they possibly could need. What we're going to do going forward with the new shelters is we're going to provide security on the outside of the campus, special attentions, 24/7. We'll be working with security and the mayor's office, and that's hopefully will get the migrants in a good place where we don't have problems, and if we do see problems popping up, we'll be able to manage it before anything bad happens. Also, the Deputy Mayor of Community Safety, Mr. Gatewood, we're working with him. We've already had a meeting in the prior week with him, and we're going to work neck and neck, arm in arm with them. Next, we have a non-emergency contact number or contact email at communityengagement@cityofchicago.org. But we look forward to ensuring the safety, and we're going to keep doing that. And we are very approachable, so let us know when you have questions or concerns, and we'll jump in.
Thank you, Commander Giltmeyer. Deputy Chief Stephen Chung, Office of Constitutional Policing and Reform, currently working with the humanitarian crisis here. The Chicago Police got involved with this as a result of us, as part of the department's help with the unhoused, initially. And so when we had the humanitarian crisis, the Chicago Police Department was the organization that was kind of doing this already. And so I will say more recently, it started off where we were housing maybe 10 or so at a time as the city was developing sheltering space. And I will say, absolutely, to echo what Commander Giltmeyer stated, the officers in the community really stepped up, especially at the onset when we saw the new arrivals coming and we were looking to provide food, shelter, and blankets and essentials. The community really stepped up. Our officers really stepped up, saw the need, and immediately jumped to that task. I will say more recently, we've seen these numbers grow, and that's why it's essential where we get some of these shelter spaces put up as quickly as possible. Today we have 1,997 within our districts and at our airports, and as we saw some of these conditions in some of the pictures, I think one of them was the 12th district. Those numbers are extremely high, and as you can imagine, we didn't see the detail in those pictures, but those pictures really highlight the need when you consider sleeping on those floors where babies, toddlers, with their parents, and those are the conditions that unfortunately we're trying to provide the best that we can, but as you can imagine, it's working operational police stations, as Commander Giltmeyer has stated. And we always advocate for our community members when they feel in danger or they feel the need that they have to report something or seek services to come to the police stations. And sometimes those disturbances, the traffic accidents or whatever, comes to the doorsteps of the police stations. And as you can imagine, sometimes those are highly volatile. We have domestic disturbances all the time that come to the stations for service. And so as you can imagine, as some of these stations, and as we saw how packed it was, it creates a danger. And so with that said, it is essential that we have some of these shelter spaces, and that's what we're kind of advocating for here today, is the shelter space at the Parthenon to help decompress some of the districts of the high numbers, to try to get our new arrivals situated in a better condition where they do have cots and services to actually get situated and move forward with what they're trying to do in Chicago here. That's the
We just have a couple of slides, and then we'll close so that we can get to the Q&A. Just very quickly, I want everyone to know that we are working diligently with the state, the county, and our federally, our elected officials at the federal level. This is really, this is a humanitarian effort that requires all levels of government, and our administration is committed to making that happen. We have begun, the state recently released a $42.5 million grant through the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus for other municipalities to step in and potentially help with the resettlement of some of the groups of the new arrivals that are coming up. And so we're working on doing that with them and just really advocating in many ways for increased funding, for additional supports, and for this to be not just a Chicago effort, but a regional effort. And people often ask us, what can I do to help? How can I volunteer? If you are interested or you know folks who are, there's an Amazon wish list for people to donate that one of our nonprofits has up. We are working on a volunteer program for people to plug in to support those mutual aid groups, especially at the police stations. There are some jobs through Favorite Staffing, which is the staffing company that we've had to rely on for shelters, in case anyone is interested in doing that type of work. And then finally, if you are an advocate and like to call your elected officials, please call them to voice your opinion and ask for the resources that Chicago needs to be able to manage this situation. And so with that, I would like to share this QR code. You can go there directly to add more questions and comments. And then I know that Sarah is going to open us up for Q&A. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you so much.
So about half of people wrote their names, about half didn't. So what I'll do is I'll call 5 people up, and then I'll sort of ask 5 questions off the other ones. So if the following people could get in line right here at the microphone: Jamie Brown, Leslie Recht, Bill Serapis, Bill Kokalius, and Jamie, who lives in the 500 block of Jefferson. Sure. Is that also you? Okay. Jamie, just pick one here. Oh, I also do want to acknowledge the representatives of the 12th District Police Council. Thank you all for being here as well. Well, one thing I do want to say off the bat that I appreciate, that the question I received the most was, is there any need for volunteers at the shelter? Are there volunteer opportunities? Can we find out? Just as a Greek American descended from Greek immigrants, my grandfather's a Greek immigrant. We know our community was built by immigrants, and I appreciate that was the sentiment that many had. And we will send out some of the relevant things from this presentation to that, volunteer opportunities being one of them here. So, Jamie, why don't you go ahead? With your single question.
Okay, thank you, Alderman, for hosting this meeting. My question's in regards, since I have to keep it to one minute. Son goes to daycare directly next to this facility, so I just want to make sure that the individuals that are being hosted have had some kind of background checks to make sure they're not certain kinds of offenders, because this is a child-friendly area. It was also mentioned that before there was no incidents. Well, that was because the city had a policy where people had to leave within 30 days. And I want to know if that's still in effect. So you're being housed for 30 days and you have to go. Because if that's not in effect, I think that's problematic if this becomes a home. I also like to know what the city's end game and plan is. Are we going to continuously open shelters in hopes of working permits to be eventually awarded? Asylum cases take years to process. I've had some at my law firm, pro bono. So what's the end game? Are we just going to open shelters across the whole city? Lastly, capacity is 136 of this facility. You guys are saying 196, so we're just breaking building code and shoving as many people in as possible, or are we going to stick to the capacity?
Denise, since you're first, I'll forgive your compound question and turn it over to the Mayor.
Thank you for the questions. I think the capacity one, we have a team that visits all the shelters and looks at what is possible, and so we landed at 196. Do you have anything to add? So I will take that back. Yeah.
But it was been 136 historically and for many years. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So I will. No, that's okay. I just want to address the other thing. The end game is that we are a welcoming city and that we will do our ways to share the responsibility regionally, and we are doing that. It also means having the shelter spaces that we need to have, and it means being able to set some limits in terms of how long people will be in shelter, how much we can help them until we help them to resettle. Those decisions are under consideration right now. We will be looking at a longer term strategy, but there isn't anything firm to share at this point. We have all that under consideration.
Daycare question. That was the one.
Get the daycare.
The daycare. Yes.
And that was a question I received from some other folks.
Yes. So we are not doing background checks on the folks that come. As people cross the border, they go through different processes, and we've asked our partners at the NIJC, the National Immigration Justice Center, to give us more clarity on the types of background checks and processing. It varies. So at this point, I cannot guarantee that everybody that comes into any of our shelters has had a background check that we can look at reliably, but most people that do cross the border do go through some type of screening at the border.
Not sure at all. All right, Leslie?
Hi, my name is Leslie Recht. I've lived in this neighborhood since 1977. I want to say that I completely support the idea of putting migrants in the Parthenon. I think that it's a very important issue and very difficult. My question was, you did say that it was single individuals, but my question was, if there are children in this particular shelter, what is the plan in terms of CPS enrollment? What school would they go to? And how would you deal with it? You know, buses, what kind of support would you be giving for any children in this shelter?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Again, Danny from the Department of Family and Support Services. I highlighted in the slide, we've enrolled hundreds of students at this point in Chicago public schools. So I would say that we've gotten, I think, pretty good at it. We're coordinating very closely with CPS, specifically their students in temporary living situations staff, which then makes folks eligible for public transportation cards, both for one parent and then all of the school-age eligible kids, so that they have a way to get to and from school. But first and foremost, if the Parthenon is to shelter families, then that's first and foremost getting them to the Cook County Hub, screening for vaccinations and so on, and then second, getting them enrolled in school. So part of our coordination with CPS is that they work through their network chiefs to identify which schools have the resources, Spanish language, and so on, and then also which schools nearby, starting with the schools nearby, which schools actually have availability. And obviously, if the closest school doesn't have the availability, or the closest school doesn't have the Spanish language resources, etc., then they go to the next closest school. So yes, first and foremost, it's our priority to get kids enrolled in school. Thank you for that question.
Yes, so I'm at ground zero of this catastrophe. I live right next door, unfortunately, to this, what's going to be a mess. I'm curious where the 200 people that are living in a 5,000 square foot footprint of a building, 3 stories high, when there's absolutely no outdoor space for them, and Halsted Street is a very narrow street, where are all those people going to be hanging out when the weather's good?
Sorry, is that, I don't want to take up your time.
Well, that's the first part of the question, but it's related to that question, is what happens when we start seeing them fill up the streets and all the businesses on that neighborhood are suffering because nobody wants to approach the businesses anymore?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think just to be frank, we have seen some of these issues pop up at other shelters. You know, we're working with our many community partners to address this. Chicago Police Department being one of them. If it is obviously illegal activity, then we can address it. You know, right now, when we welcome folks at the shelter, first and foremost, we need to educate people on our cultural norms, not just in Chicago, but in a new country, in a new state. It's also very different to be in an urban area, so sort of educating them both through the shelter staff, through city staff. B and I have been at house meetings with shelter residents so that they understand that what we're seeing is not okay, and what we expect in terms of like cultural norms, and what we expect in terms of respecting the space in the community, you know, being a good neighbor and what it means to be a good neighbor is part of our shelter rules and expectations that residents sign at intake. So ultimately, if someone does become a disruption, either for the immediate shelter or for the immediate community, then we may lead to discharge, but first and foremost, we want to make sure that folks understand the cultural norms and that we're meeting them where they are with the supports they need to navigate their new community.
I will say that, as Danny had related, that socialization has been key. So as we know that a lot of these new arrivals are not from like the city, and so the cultural norms, the good neighbor training, that's been essential. Actually, the staff that's at a lot of these shelters have actually been really proactive with getting some of our new arrivals to be proactive in cleaning up the communities and picking up items. And so that helps. I will say that at all the shelter spaces, there is an 11 p.m. curfew, and that kind of assists with getting everybody back within the shelter space. It helps bring a little bit of order as well. I know within the different shelter spaces throughout the city, we've been really proactive with our special attentions at the different shelter spaces, checking in with the shelter space on a regular basis, checking in with their security. And there has been some issues where we've had to work with other agencies to proactively address. But that's some of the growing pains that we, with new arrivals coming to different areas and just getting acclimated to the environment. And part of that is that education with the police department as well as our other city services.
And we have a partnership with the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights they have a network of organizations that are at each of our shelters working to help those folks who are staying there really understand what it means to be in those communities. They work with them on integrating into Chicago life and help with the kind of common understanding about what it means to be a resident of the shelter and to be a good neighbor. It's not perfect. You're right that there's, it's a lot of people. And I think helping them to know what the community is about, where they can go in the neighborhood will also be important. And that's where partnerships with people who want to support or organizations that want to help welcome folks could be important to make this a more smooth process. At every shelter where we have seen some dynamics and issues, this team and many others, I want you to really just understand too that there are so many people at the city level working on this effort, and we take it very seriously to run shelters that are operated well, that are safe, both for the residents and for the community. It's hard, it's not easy. We're very aware of the concerns, and we do as much as we can to help smooth those over. So again, our lines of communication will be open, and as this evolves and unfolds, and we do encounter any challenges, we're gonna step up to try to see how we can mitigate them.
That's good, because I will be calling in the summertime
when I see him along the street, all 200.
Also, Bill?
Good evening. Pastor Doyle, Pastor Vision Ministries. Outside of Alderman Conway, may I ask which 5 of you, if any, have served? Meaning in one of 5 branches.
I'm sorry, served.
Served, meaning one of 5 branches. Alderman Conway is the Navy veteran. Here's why. I am a United States Marine Corps veteran who, as a social worker, who stepped away from the business, meaning the talent in the back, reporting facts, in the last year, numerous veterans of different racial, ethnic, sexual orientation, and how we present ourselves, backgrounds, have been profoundly triggered simply because of the notion of being forgotten. Because again, at the end of the day, at the end of the day, when you put your life on the line for the freedoms that you speak of, it helps when you've walked in our shoes. So for those of us who are social workers in the room and our workload has increased, specifically with disabled veterans, those who have no or one or all limbs missing, who can't get a room, yet they watch.
Yeah.
So for the record, I'm a 19th ward, meaning my family integrated the 19th ward. And so from the standpoint of doing your time, please remember that for those of us who put in long hours, particularly in the last year, to find spaces for those who have served, please remember who came first. Thank you.
Pastor, I do thank you for your comments. As a fellow member of the Department of the Navy, may not identifies that, but I appreciate your comments. But I will say, that all these folks are here to really help in the humanitarian crisis that we face today. And I can tell you that I will certainly be a firm advocate, as well as fellow veterans in City Council, for our homeless veterans, and I'm confident that my partners on stage will partner in that effort as well. So I'll call up 5 more, but then while that's getting, Kelly Bauman, I don't know if I miss you, or Kelly, you're first then. Tracy M, Roger Addy, Rebecca B, and Lisa B. If you could all get in line, please.
Hi, my name is Kelly Bauman. I'm a Master of Public Health student at UIC. I've also been volunteering at police stations and at O'Hare. The past several months, it's alarming, the conditions, so I'm really happy that the shelter's opening. But I specifically have a question about this mask grant. We've been having trouble finding a city partner to be like our overall grantee. We'd like to be a self-grantee since we're providing most of those services on the ground. So I'm wondering, Deputy Mayor, if you have any contacts or leads for us that we can reach out to.
If you could give your name to Sarah, and we'll follow up for sure. Thank you. And thank you for what you're doing, because I'm very aware of the work that we're doing. So I appreciate it.
Tracy?
Good evening, and first I want to thank you, Alderman Conway, for your handling of this new development and your transparency and communication with the community.
Thank you. I will allow some statements. One's about veterans or compliments, please.
So, thanks for being here. I live 2 blocks away from the site. I am a proponent of the site. I think Chicago being a welcoming city is a value I hold that's very important, and that means every neighborhood has to step up. But it also means the whole state has to step up. And so I'm wondering what more can the state of Illinois be doing? What more advocacy can we be doing so that the burden does not lie so intensely on the city of Chicago?
Thank you. We do have a good partnership with the state. They have funded, for example, they fund the Greater Chicago Food Depository to provide many of our meals, the resettlement work. I think that as we are in talks with them about how to support other municipalities in being welcoming areas, and this $42.5 million that I mentioned to Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus is one of those ways. I would invite you to reach out to your elected officials and let them know, how you feel and what you might, what else they can, and ask them what else the state can do to support us. But I have to say that the state has been at the table and a pretty positive partner with us. So thank you.
I've been a long-time resident here, 27 years now, my wife and I. But my question actually, somewhat got an answer to my original, but I just listened to a really good podcast on the Daily today, read about the 100,000 people in New York City. That was in the Daily. And that's what happens when you open your arms like that. You want to do it, the word gets out, and they have 58,000 people they're trying to house right now, over 100,000 in New York City. And I just fear that there's a little line back here. The first person who spoke asked us a long-range plan. The number of people who want to come here is infinite. How do you manage this influx? You're making it, you might be actually competing with New York City and say, no, come here. Let's have those 100,000 people come here, and then we'll bury ourselves like they are. So I'll stop rambling, but that was my question.
No, thank you for that comment. And it is a delicate balance. I mean, we are a welcoming city. We are a compassionate city. And as people come here, we're not going to let people sleep on the streets and become a greater issue than we have. I think that there are efforts to talk to the border cities that are sending people this way. I've been part of those conversations, and we're planning to do more to see if there are ways that we can mitigate the number of folks that are coming our way. I really invite all of you to call on your federal elected officials and ask for there to be more support in terms of how we are managing that situation at the border. I think that if we stand back and do nothing and just say, we're not going to provide shelter, we're not going to do anything, people will still come, and we will still be dealing with a humanitarian crisis. So finding the right balance to how we can, welcome them in a way that is safe for all, and that eventually puts people on a path to be independent and be contributing members of Chicago and their Chicago area. That is our goal. It's a challenge, it's difficult. I wanted to comment on the fact that this work that we're doing is really building our infrastructure as well for other crises that may come. We know that there's climate change, there are other types of humanitarian crises that might send people to the Chicago area, and what we're doing right now is preparing us for that situation. And we also are looking at learning a lot at how quickly we've been able to respond so that we are improving our system of care for other people, for people who are Chicagoans who are struggling with housing, who are experiencing homelessness, for folks like veterans who are unhoused, and looking at how we improve our overall system of care for our neighbors who are in need is also part of this learning process. So I'm hoping that as we go through this situation, Chicago becomes stronger in our infrastructure. We create new sources of supports and ways to address any crisis that might come our way.
Hi, my name is Lisa. Really just one question. How can I help? Really specific, where can I go to find out how I can help? I'm retired, not computer savvy. That's great. If I could just have guidance, I'll I'm free.
Thank you. Sarah, your number, and I think what I would say right now is we always need help at our police districts, and there are groups of organized volunteers there, so hopefully we can plug you into one of them. Thank you.
A few of the questions, I'm gonna go to a few of the questions that were asked without names. So, are the migrants being taught to speak English?
Yes, good question.
I've received that a few times.
Yeah, good question. So in some cases, we've actually been sheltering folks in community colleges facilities. So we've actually, folks have been able to walk to their ESL course on campus. Otherwise, I was actually just in conversation with the City Colleges of Chicago last week to connect each shelter with their local community college so that folks can enroll in their local ESL course or in their local, what CCC calls their off-site locations that are typically hosted by like a local church or a local community partner, so that we're not overwhelming any one partner. Some shelters are very large and we have hundreds of people that want to learn English, so we want to make sure that we're meeting the full need and not overwhelming any one partner. But the short answer is yes, folks are getting connected to ESL resources.
And we can do more, so if anyone is interested in plugging in to that, there are plenty of people that would be interested in learning English, that we could do a better job of making sure everyone has access to it.
And I can tell you, since I know I've got a lot of questions about volunteering, we're certainly going to put that out about how best way to do that. But a question I did get is, will some of these slides be made available?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So I think I can whack that one out pretty quick. All right. And this is one you've addressed it a few times, but I got it so many times that I want to see if anyone has anything to add. What is being done to keep the residents in the neighborhood safe? Which I know you've spoken a lot on that, but I got it a few times and didn't know if there was more to add.
We are increasing, we do have a foot officer on Halsted already in Greektown. We are increasing our stop bys. I don't know how else to say it. Our special attentions is the verbiage that we use, but if anyone knows that. Also, we are going to be working with the building security, so we'll be in the building to see what's going on, and then once people are outside, we'll know who they are. So if we see them in the neighborhood, we're going to say hi, and we're going to stop and see what's going on. And then if we get a 911 call, we'll be able to go right away and we'll understand what's happening.
What is the city and state doing to get the federal government to help?
That's a great question, and we're doing a lot. So we have met very regularly with our elected officials, Congressman Gutierrez, Congresswoman Schakowsky, Senator Durbin, Congresswoman Delia Ramirez, Mike Quigley. They are all in communication with us, with the mayor, with the governor, and I think it's an interesting time in that we have good alignment at the city, county, state level and with our federal elected officials. So we know we are definitely meeting with them regularly and aligning our requests of the federal government. You might have seen in the news last week, there was a press conference, the governor, the mayor, and several of the elected officials, the American Business for Immigrant, I forget, ABIC and IBIC, that are business groups that support immigrant integration because of the workforce needs. And we called for the federal government to approve a state temporary work authorization for immigrants who need that permission to work. Our state has an opportunity. We have an opportunity to make that happen, but we do need federal approval. So that is another thing that folks can advocate for, is asking the federal government, DHS specifically, to approve Illinois' request to support temporary work authorization for immigrants. Thank you.
I'm going to ask the following people to line up, and then I'll go back to the questions. Bobby L.
Asylum seeker is the term that I saw on the graphic over there. If you're an asylum seeker, to me that means you're being persecuted and you're on the run. I kind of noticed that a lot of these asylum seekers are fat. You're weird. How bad can it be? I think the problem
if it's all right, I'm going to summarize your question too. Why are these folks called asylum seekers?
Yeah, go home.
I think what the folks that we're seeing are a combination of asylum seekers and other migrants coming through the southern border. They're seeking asylum from persecution, from violence, from different situations. As I said at the beginning, every one of us has a right to seek asylum. They will go through an application process and they might be granted asylum or they might not, but we all have a right to seek asylum, and that's why we use the term asylum seeker predominantly when we talk about the folks that we're helping to settle here in Chicago.
Thank you very much, Alderman. First of all, I want to thank you and the panel for having this meeting to give us more information on what this is all about. My point is that the city has, for licensure, particularly liquor licenses, a plan of operation in which the city and the individual community members work together to come out with a common plan. I'm going to ask this body if we could have a community plan starting this week or next week with the local groups, Greektown SSA, Greektown Chamber, West Loopgate, West Central, and for us to take on the burden of information to the community, but also get input to you, the city, because of the fact that you are the people that are serving with us and for us. So my question here is, if we can establish a community plan with a review in 6 months to have possibly termination, if it's successful, as an option.
I welcome the community input, and I think if perhaps with the Alder's office, we can work on that together. We are looking at all of our shelters at the 6-month mark to see, do we need to keep it open? Is this something we can scale down or sunset? So yes, thank you for that offer. I'm happy to work with you on it.
Thank you. And my last comment would be if we could keep down the people to the occupants.
So, yeah, Dean, I'll say that, I hold the Greektown SSA in strong regard, so certainly can lead the effort to set that up. And I think that the deputy mayor is committed to finding out about the difference in quantity.
Yes.
But thank you, Dean. Yes, sir?
Hi, my name is Sterling. I live here in West Loop. My question was originally around the capacity or occupancy of the Parthenon is single room occupancy or what that looks like. But I also wanted to learn more information on this invitation for other municipalities to join the effort in supporting migrants. Has anyone taken up those invitations, right? Like, this is Chicago, but there's also Chicagoland, so are other municipalities in conversation about joining the effort?
Yes, thankfully there are, and I'm not saying it's 20, right, but we do have a handful of our neighbors that are also welcoming to immigrants and want to find a way to plug in. I think it's going to look differently for each one depending on their capacity, but again, the state funding of that $42.5 million that's out for grants right now is a good incentive. And some of the new arrivals that started coming last year are already in some of our neighboring suburbs, and so it's an opportunity to kind of build on those communities there. But yes, they are, as well as the county.
Thank you.
And then in terms of your first question of the single room occupancy, so every room will be a shared room. Depending on the size of the room, it may have 4 people, some may have 6, so it'll be like semi-congregate setting.
Thank you.
Brenda?
Yep. Hi, I'm Brenda. I've lived in the neighborhood for almost 9 years, and I really enjoy being a good neighbor. And the building I live in is a very special place. So even though there's a lot of discussion tonight on different groups and advocacy and individual action, what is the #1 action we should take as a good neighbor? What's the #1?
That is a really good question, one that we haven't gotten after, I would say, like a couple of dozen community meetings in the last year. So I think you stumped us a little bit, but I think it's getting getting, I think, the good thoughts flowing. I would say, I mean, like, you would want to be treated as a neighbor. Does your best neighbor say good morning when you see them? Does your best neighbor instead just look the other way? I would say treat them like you would want to be treated as a neighbor, which I think goes back to like the elementary, like treat people how you would want to be treated. Specifically, how would you want a neighbor to be to you? Extend that same care and connection to them. And that's something that we're trying to build from them too. Like, you are new neighbors to folks. Yes, this is a temporary arrangement for you, but while you are here, you are neighbors to people, you are their neighbor, this is your new home. Treat this how you would want folks to treat your own home. So thank you for that question. And I don't know if others want to add.
I think I'm Glenn Lyman, I'm Deputy Director at Office of Emergency Management and Communication. So what the OEMC does is coordinate all these agencies together. And we have an emergency operations center that's open every day to manage this mission. But to answer your question specifically there, I think one key word, and that's understanding. Understand what they're going through and help them get through it as a neighbor.
We were at a large shelter, one of the bigger ones, and I asked folks how many of them had met someone in the neighborhood. And I would say maybe a third of the people raised their hand. And then I asked how many of you would like to meet someone from your neighborhood, and everybody raised their hand. And that's just human nature. I know it's hard, and there will be some people that might not have the best behavior, but you know, as much as we can welcome and get to know people, I think we'll go a long way. Thank you for that question.
Can I just add one thing? Sorry. Yeah. I just want to add one thing. I think one of the best things you can do is join your local mutual aid network. Yeah. I think we have a lot of mutual aid volunteers here. You want to reach out, connect with them, and figure out which one's your most local case district to connect and help the asylum seekers there.
People also need blankets and food. Yeah.
So Vasily, I know you have a couple and they're related, so summarize that.
Sure, thanks Alderman and all of you for helping us out in this situation. We've been dealt a very difficult hand. My thoughts go out to the police too, given everything that's happened over the past couple of years. And now you're in a situation where migrants are being housed, so I appreciate that we're trying to go forward and make a decision to move them out of the police office. I guess my question is more about just general preparedness for our city. I've read a lot and keep hearing the word crisis. I believe Chicago has received about 14,000 migrants. As we've heard before, New York has received over 100,000. And there are at least around 2 million border crossings that happen each year. So if we're saying that 14,000 people is a crisis, my concern is what will happen in the city of Chicago when we're really faced with a momentous situation that is truly a crisis. Thank you.
I don't know if there's a specific question I'm asking.
Yeah, I'm saying, more about our preparedness. I mean, we're calling this a crisis, 14,000. New York has had over more than 100,000. So how do we think about what a true crisis is and what is really our, kind of related to the longer term, like what is our real steps for preparing for a true crisis?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think the one thing that for this, we're calling it a humanitarian crisis. I'm sure other cities across the nation are calling it that too, because I think it's just a fact. But I would say one thing that we haven't had in this crisis that many municipalities, when they're facing other crises, is sort of the federal declaration that this is a crisis, which then, or an emergency, which then opens up federal resources and things like the American Red Cross and all kinds of other resources that, because this crisis specifically has not been declared federally as a crisis, all of those resources have not been made available to us. I think in sort of the other crises that I think, so when we talk about preparedness as a city, are resources that would then be able to give us the preparedness to respond to that crisis in front of us. It's just not something that's been extended to us, unfortunately, in this crisis.
And we are adding to our infrastructure, so all that coordination that OEMC does, the shelter operations that we're building and looking at the future, we know that we need to staff up a little more in our major agencies like DFSS and OEMC. I think we're learning a lot about what it looks like to have folks in a police station. We were used to maybe a handful of people every few nights, but these pieces that we've had to build are preparing us for future incidents. Thank you.
I'll turn to a few from the cards at this point. So it was a long time.
How long after they apply do they get it? We need workers, and they want to work. What else can be done?
So the Parthenon is a hostel type setting. So it's community bathrooms. There isn't. I don't believe there's rooms that have single-use bathrooms within the actual room. So they're all on each floor. Again, community-style bathrooms and showers. Still privacy in individual stalls, but nonetheless shared by the floor versus a bathroom per room. And first and foremost, like when folks are intaked at the shelter, and actually at this point, even without being in shelter, we're trying to connect people to healthcare specifically because they've had a long journey. They've had a long journey to Chicago. It's 24 hours on a bus that has blasting AC. So many of them are often getting off the bus with a scratchy throat, a minor cough, and typically what that means is because they've been sitting on a bus with blasting AC within a couple of days that those symptoms typically have gone away. This is generally a very healthy population, but our first and foremost, our goal is to get folks to Cook County Health for a full health screening, which includes COVID testing, COVID vaccinations, and vaccinations of all kinds, not just for COVID. And then follow-up appointments. Many of them are arriving, not many of them, some of them are arriving with illnesses that they have had to manage on their journey here, and so we're making sure that folks are connected to specialty care, connected to medication support, and so on. So folks on a daily basis are being screened for the first time at Cook County Health or have follow-up appointments within the Cook County Health system, within our community-based healthcare providers, and really everyone is sharing the love to make sure that folks are getting the healthcare support that they need.
So this next group of questions I'll call as duration of time at the shelter. So, can the city commit to this as a temporary shelter? The one-year lease doesn't include any options for the tenants. What will happen to the building when the migrant use is done? So, maybe stick to the timetable ones. Those last ones maybe beyond control. Anyway.
Yes, I think we mentioned earlier that all of our shelters, we really tried to get into the habit of evaluating at the 6-month mark and really understanding at that 6-month mark, is this shelter serving, what we needed to serve in terms of the bigger picture of our sheltering operation? Given the current status of things, I anticipate that we would likely still be at the Parthenon beyond the 6 months, but I'm not making any commitments now. We'll evaluate at the 6 months, and if it's a space that, we have to occupy, then we'll, make sure that the aldermen and others are aware that needs to occur. But otherwise, we have a full intake, so to make sure that folks are actually new arrivals, there are, questions that we ask upon intake to make sure that folks that are being intaked and housed at a new arrival shelter are indeed new arrivals and new to Chicago.
I do want to add, though, that we have become more aware, especially at the police stations, of other Chicago residents that are struggling with housing, that need shelter, that need wraparound supports. And we are looking at ways to connect the two efforts so that we are building a system that really addresses the needs of other folks who are experiencing homelessness or need access to mental health or substance use treatment. And that is improving our system of care for all Chicagoans.
This new location is very close to UIC, which is an open campus university. How is safety being considered in collaboration with UIC and UIC police to keep students safe and undisturbed?
Great relationship with UIC. We work with their police department daily, if not moment by moment. When I leave here, I'll call the chief, and we're going to go and we'll discuss different strategies that we'll need, what they're concerned about from the UIC perspective and student housing and stuff like that. If there's concerns, we'll go from there. So it's not an outrageous concern, but it is being managed, and we will keep everybody on board. They'll know if there's any kind of situation that the school needs to be aware of. We'll blast it out to the school right away, and they can, from there they'll give it to their students. So they are being well taken care of also.
And I will also certainly vouch for the quality of the UIC police. I believe they have 80 officers as well. Commander, you may know these, but I think it was 80 or 81 officers last I checked. So they have a significant police department.
I want to just add that the vast majority of people are not committing any crimes, and they're just people who are here, they want to work, they want to have a life. when we see incidents, we step in and we're trying to prevent them. But really, the vast majority of people are doing what they need to be doing, and they are people that we can be comfortable with.
All right. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get to all the questions you see this segment. I'll ask this last one. Where will meals from our new neighbors be sourced from? How will we ensure the quality of these meals?
Yeah, so currently our two meal providers for our 18 shelters are Open Kitchens and the Greater Chicago Food Depository. For the Parthenon, it would be the Greater Chicago Food Depository that is serving 3 meals a day, 1 cold meal, 2 hot meals, 7 days a week with water and snacks in between, available at all times. So that for the Parthenon will be the Chicago Food Depository. And then we also have, shortly we'll be releasing meals RFP, so that if there are providers that are interested in supporting the mission and getting funded to do so, then they can apply for the RFP. And then depending on their region and their capacity, then we would evaluate them and ultimately award folks that are interested. So that'll be incoming pretty soon.
What is Mayor Johnson going to do about the 680 murders this year? And how about all the little kids on the south and west side that get killed and the people that do it don't go to jail?
Well, while I
What
appreciate
do you
the question and some of them
Right
is
here.
in law enforcement,
Dude, take a number.
it's not an appropriate question for this forum or for the folks up here.
I think it is.
But I do want to thank you all very much for coming here tonight.